to my sisters and I having such an easy time with the moves is that my parents integrated us in the decision process. So for the move to Germany, my parents actually asked us, well, how do you guys feel? Do you guys want to stay here or do you guys want to move there? We were like, for sure want to move there, but we always felt included. And it never.
Welcome to the show, Alex. Thank you so much for being here. How's your day so far?
Thank you so much for having me. It's going good. It's already 3 p.m. in Rotterdam, where I live in the Netherlands. And I've been taking it slow, doing some work, enjoying the long weekend.
Oh, yes, yes. So, yeah, we're gonna get into life in the Netherlands. So that's why I wanted to bring you on here because you were telling me a little bit about your moves and the language barriers and just so many things. And I thought, oh my gosh, people need to know about this because I've always wanted to move out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
But it is something scary. I mean, I moved from coast to coast, and that is an adjustment in its own. So, yeah, tell us, how did you end up there?
Well, so that's a story in itself. And it has a lot to do with failure, actually. So, to start at the very beginning, I was born in Ecuador, in South America. And the with time I have learned that switching countries has been a thing my family has been doing since long before I was born. My grandfather on my mom's side, he moved from Peru to Honduras to attend a university called El Zamorano, and that's where he met my grandma, and he decided to stay there. And for my grandma, her parents had moved from her mother, so my great grandma had moved from El Salvador to Honduras to be with my great grandfather. And then eventually, when my mom was born, and she grew up in Honduras, and then at the tender age of 18, she meets this young Ecuadorian, and they decide we have to get married. So at the age of 19 and 21, they decide to get married. They're madly in love, and they move to Ecuador. So that's already moving around, has been in my family for many, many generations. And then when I am 15, my older sister is 16 and my younger sister is 3, my dad gets this call from a headhunter saying that a company in Mexico is looking for somebody with his expertise. And we moved to Mexico.
Wow.
Suddenly, one day, my dad comes out of nowhere and says, guys, I have this job opportunity. How do you guys feel? And we're like, scared. I remember being very, very scared. But my parents thought that this was a challenge. It was an opportunity. It was something they wanted to try. My parents were finishing their first house because from that point on, we had always been from living with my grandparents to renting to having like 5 or 6 apartments,
Mhm.
always wanting to go for something better. And they had bought an apartment, sold that apartment, built their house that was supposed to be the house we were going to all live together with everything, and just said, yeah, we're gonna take this on. We're gonna jump in full on. And after 4 years in Mexico, my sister is already going to medical school in the north of Mexico. I am preparing to go off to college.
Mhm.
Um, my dad tells us I have this job offer in Germany. And it was strange because I had to put my life completely on pause because I
Wow.
knew that I couldn't go off to college because I didn't know if my parents were going to even be in the country for much longer. So I put my whole life on pause for like 6 months. And then my dad said, yeah, so we're moving to Germany. We're doing this. And we picked up and moved to Germany. By this time, my younger sister is 7, I'm 18, and my older sister is 19. And since my older sister and I already spoke German, it was a very easy transition in the sense that coming from a German school, that's the school we were in Ecuador, going off and studying in Germany was always something that was in the back of our heads. That's what you do. You're in a German school. It's eventually you're going to go on exchange. We had already been on exchange. My parents had sent us to Germany when we were 12 and 13
Mhm.
to just experience the culture, the language, improve our German skills. And so we already knew the country. We both loved it. So that one was an easy choice. That was a no-brainer. And we moved to a tiny town that had maybe like 200 people, but was close to a town that had 16,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a switch already, going from sun and maybe when being in a place where 20 degrees Celsius is already like, let's put on a coat, let's put on a jacket for 20 degrees Celsius, to minus 20
Oh my
Celsius, which was already a change. And then eventually I moved to Hamburg because I think I told you this before. Germany doesn't recognize high school degrees from other countries, so
right.
I had to do a year again in something called a Studienkolleg, which is basically doing the last year of high school again. And you can choose between four courses. I chose the completely wrong course. That course was not for me. And I was also very arrogant because school had always come easy to me. So I didn't think that I needed to try very hard. And I didn't. And I ended up failing at it. And my entire life took a completely different path. I ended up moving in with my sister. By that time, we had moved to a bigger town, but we were living in the suburbs. And my older sister, because she was going to medical school, she wanted to live in the center of the town.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Hey, I want to move out of mom and dad's house. You need something in your life," because by that time I was very, very shaken. I was very doubting myself. I was borderline depressed. And I said, okay, let's do it. I happened to move across the street from a graphic design school. I said, okay, I've always been interested in this. Maybe I can do this while I figure something else out. And I never left. And I never left. I fell in love with it. I realized that I had always been in love with it. I was just always scared of doing graphic design because in Latin America, graphic design is very narrow, it's very specific. So when I got this chance, um, I fell in love with making infographics. Eventually, after I graduated, a few months later, I got a job as an infographic designer for a very big company. And that allowed me to stay in the country, even if my parents weren't in the country anymore, because by this time they had moved back to Ecuador. And I loved it. I got my German citizenship, and but I was very unsatisfied in my job. I was thinking, okay, this is great. I like my 9 to 5. I like my paycheck, but I am not satisfied with what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I start and because everybody in my family at this time had a bachelor's degree, and I was the only one who didn't have one. And I thought, okay, if I ever have kids, I want them to also pursue education. It's fine if they don't want to, it's okay, but I don't want me not having one to be the reason why they don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be completely their choice. I don't want my, because I had read this study that kids always go for the same degree their parents have, for like the same level of education or higher.
Yeah.
And that stuck in my head. I thought, okay, if I want them to be more than me or at my level or take a completely different path. I don't want my not having a degree be something that limits them. So I decided to go back to school. And since I was European, my student fees were completely different. So funny enough, in the Netherlands, if you are a European citizen, you pay the standard tuition, if which is around 2,000 euros per year. If you're not a European citizen, you pay around 7,000 or 8,000.
Wow.
Because as a European citizen, the EU pays for part of your tuition. So there is that correlation.
Mm-hmm.
And since I had just gotten my German passport, I said, okay, I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna do it. And I applied to a lot of schools in Belgium, in Spain, in France. And my parents then moved to the Netherlands, and then they tell me, hey, there is an art school near here. Have you thought about looking it up? And I thought, am I really going to follow my parents from country to country? By this point, I'm 26, so I keep thinking I should be wanting to move away from them. But it just happened to be the place that I liked the most, the place that had the most challenging admission process, because every other school was just like, okay, your portfolio is fine. Just send us the money and you're in. And this other school was like, we need to see your portfolio. We need to give you a challenge. You need to come interview. And I thought, okay, let's see why this is so hard. And I loved it. And it's where I am now. And that by that time, switching countries was something that I thought, I've done it before. It's okay. I don't owe many things. And what's really funny is that when I told my coworkers that, a lot of my coworkers were shocked. They were like, "Are you just going to leave the country? You're just gonna pick up and leave?" And I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much." Because I get it. For them, there are people that for they had I had, for example, a coworker who had always lived in the same town. So to her, leaving her town was a huge challenge. Was even moving apartments for her was a big deal. But to me, it was more like, it's not the first time I switch countries. It's probably not gonna be the last. I don't own many things. I'm also a person that I don't own furniture because every time I have, no, I do own. I own a chair that is my desk chair because I am always on my desk, so I need a comfortable desk chair. But even when I got it, I was thinking, I'm going to leave this apartment at one point and I'm going to have to drag that chair around with me. So that whole moving around has fed into different aspects of my life. I'm very practical when it comes to buying things. Every time that I buy a piece of clothing, I keep thinking, okay, I'm going to have to drag this along with me at some point. So it does have affected my life in many ways, but it also has given me this freedom from location or from place.
Wow.
So, for example, if I was talking to my parents the other day, and they were asking me, "Don't you want to own a place one day? Do you want to own an apartment one day?" And I'm like, "It's a nice idea for an investment one day, maybe, but I don't know where I'm gonna be. I don't know if I'm gonna get a job in Amsterdam or I'm gonna get a job in Utrecht or I'm gonna get a job in France. I don't know all those things."
Mhm.
And then when my boyfriend talks about one day that he might want to move to the US, I'm like, "Yeah, I would be down." He's like, "Isn't it scary for you?" And I'm like, it's not. It's not really because I've done it before.
Mhm.
So switching countries, it's not. I think I will be scared to move to a country again where I don't speak the language at all, which is what happened with the Netherlands. But switching to a country that I already know the language, it would be more like, okay, new adventure. Things
Yeah.
Worst thing that can happen is I move back here. So
So this is so fascinating because I don't meet people with this background. I think this is the first time. I mean, I've met people who have moved as adults to one country or two, but you have multiple moves, and then it's also in your background. You know, your parents did it before, so that's really fascinating. And I agree, it is very hard to move. I know people. Particularly one very close to me who, I mean, as an adult cried like because she had to move one state away from her family. And she had to
yeah,
move because her husband had gotten a job offer, a really sweet job offer. And though we all knew it was going to be a great opportunity, in her world it was just crumbling because she was leaving her family behind. And you know, here in the United States, statistically, like when somebody moves homes, like say if they purchase a home, typically
hmm
they go no more than 5 miles away from their original residence.
yeah,
So it's not, it's such a small move compared to moving out of the the country. I have made moves. I moved a lot as a child due to certain circumstances. So to me, it was really just natural to just move from one house to the other. And like you, I remember thinking like, oh, well, it's just no big deal. And I know that for some people, friendships are so important. And you mentioned when you first left Ecuador, you were
hmm
15, right?
yeah,
So you had friends and you were at that stage where friendships is very important. And usually kids at that age are like, no, you know, this is my life. And oh, they'll even say things like, I hate my parents for doing this to me. But you just took it in stride. And I'm sure it was not easy, but I mean, how was that experience? How was that first move leaving, you know, your friends behind? And because you said from there you went to Mexico, right?
yeah. It was, and it wasn't. It was actually that's actually a very funny story. So we left when I was 15, and years later, maybe like 7 years later, I was already living in Germany, and an old friend from high school from Ecuador contacted me on Facebook saying, "Hey, I'm I'm in Germany now. I'm looking for a job. Do you know any companies near you in your area? And I'm like, yeah, I have these 5 companies, have friends who work there. You can ask them for references if they like it. And eventually he moves to my city and we go out for Mexican food. And just randomly, one of my friends owned a restaurant and we go there. And he very secretly asked me, so quick question, why did you guys move really? And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, because my dad's job. It's like, yeah, the thing is that you guys just disappeared one day, and we all thought that your dad was a drug dealer. Even the
Oh
parents
my
thought that.
gosh.
And I thought, wait, what? I didn't just disappear. I made a whole thing with giving you all guys brownies. With like your name tags and saying that let's stay friends forever and so on. Um, but yeah, it was strange. So I think at that age it's such an awkward stage. Like 15, it's such an awkward stage. And I had maybe like 3 4 close friends, but it wasn't like I had a gang that I was hanging out with. And I think I was at that stage that I hadn't had those teenage bonding experiences yet.
Mhm.
Also because I think my childhood extended way too, like I was 14 and I was seeing my friends getting boyfriends and so on, and I was still like, I don't know, yeah, I don't even know if this is something for me yet. So my childhood extended a lot, so I wasn't super integrated with that. I had good friends, which I'm still friends with, but I was more excited for the chance to see something new than I was scared. I was scared of leaving my family behind because I was very close to my cousins, and I was scared of not having that family unit of meeting up every Sunday to like the classic Latin American family thing. We hang out every Sunday and so on. I was more scared of not having that. But because I was so close to my parents, and also in I am still to this day very close to my parents, and I'm clearly close to my sisters. I had this idea that as long as I was with them, everything would be fine. That I would make new friends, and they always told us, "You will make new friends. It's not the end of the world. In we're gonna power through this." So I was never afraid of that. I always thought I think my curiosity for what was out there was bigger than my fear of not having friends.
Mhm.
And yeah, after that it was really great. It was fun. I think it also in I also a lot of it had to do with the fact that Facebook was not really a thing yet, at least not where I was. So I couldn't see what my friends were up to, and I never felt like they were having parties without me or anything because I was not on social media yet. So it was like, I'm not going to school, I'm not seeing my friends, I'm disconnected from them through in that way.
Wow.
And yeah, I think that actually helped a lot. But it is strange because I think that also had to do with the fact that as an adult I don't have any like childhood friends because I entered the German school when I was 8. And so I was only in that school for 7 years, and that might sound like it was a long time, but I had classmates who had been in that school since they were 3, so they already had such a history together that I didn't have.
Mhm.
So because I switched schools, I never stayed in touch with anybody I knew before I was 8 years old. And now I have very few close friends in Ecuador. I think I have like maybe like 3 or 4. One of them, weirdly, we reconnected as adults. And because he left the school, I think the year after I came to that school. And then as adults, we reconnected and we were like, we were in the same class once upon a time. It's like, yeah, we were in the same class once upon a time. How are you? I'm great. And we became very good friends as adults just because of that little, apparently we clicked on that one year that we were in the same class.
Wow, that's amazing. I can relate to some of this because I moved. So I moved as a kid, but then I also was in the military, and in the military, you move so much. It's like
Mm-hmm.
every 2 years you're moving out of a state or a country. And for me, I remember that initial, like leaving home in basic training. I remember seeing adults, people much older than me who were going through the training. And they
Mm-hmm.
would break down and cry, like sob. And I couldn't understand that. I was like, what's the big deal? And they're like, I just miss my family. And I was like, but I don't get it. And I feel like, oh, maybe that was heartless of me, or maybe something's wrong with me. But then, of course, I realized no, it was just that I was just used to just letting go, and knowing that the family's still there. And my situation was different because I was there alone. So at least you
Mhm.
were with your family. So I can understand how difficult it can be for somebody to just say, well, I've always wanted to live in France, but I don't know, like I'd have to leave all my family
Yeah.
behind. And it's really, really hard. I mean, I just moved back from California back to Maryland with my kids, and they're so happy to be back, but it's something familiar to them. When we moved left from Maryland to California, they were a little bit excited because they have my family members over there, but they did struggle, and they had to adjust to things such as, okay, the weather alone was an issue because East Coast is, you have all four seasons. It's super cold in the winter. um, it's very humid here in the summers, and then California was super hot. It was they still make fun of it. They were like, there's warm and then there's hot, hot. And then
I
the
can
schools
relate.
too. Yeah, they always complain about the schools. They're like, oh, they have like outdoor schools. And I'm like, what do you mean outdoor schools? Well, you have to like walk out of your classroom out into the heat and go to the next building. And in Maryland, everything's enclosed. It's one huge building, and there's hallways inside, so you don't have to get exposed to the cold or the heat or whatever. So they absolutely hated that about California schools. And then recess too. They're like, it's just hot. Like, what's the point of recess? So all these little things that you don't realize are different until you move to another location. So
Yeah.
can you share with us, to me, like you shared about the tuition, that is shocking. That is amazing. Like I
That
was
is
telling my
amazing.
kids, like you need to consider going to Europe for school.
Yeah.
Because you
It's
said,
crazy.
yeah, you said UK citizens get partly subsidized tuition, and
Yeah.
and so it reduces your expenses drastically.
Well, not UK, EU. So the
Yeah,
UK is
I'm
weird
sorry.
because I don't know what's going to happen there because they're no longer part of the EU, so I cannot speak to that. But the EU citizens get this special. It's I don't think it's special tuition. I think it's like the standard tuition, and then non-EU citizens get the other tuition.
Mhm.
And it's really weird, but it's also very interesting. It's about encouraging people to actually go to university. And like I said, for example, in my case, I was prepared because I'm paying for university all myself. And like through my freelancing, I'm like gathering savings and then I pay for university. And it has been very manageable. It wouldn't have been manageable if I was a non-EU citizen. So that was a huge part of my choice. Then I remember that when I first moved here, I went to a university event. And in the university event, they gave me a book. And I freaking love that book because and that's actually a project that I have. I want to make that book for non-students for it to make it as a resource for anybody arriving into the Netherlands because they have very specific things. They have, for example, you have arrived in the Netherlands. The first thing you're going to need is you have to make an appointment. It's by step by step. Step one, go to the City Hall website. Step two, sign up to get a BSN. A BSN is an identification number that you give it for everything. So if you want to get a bank account, you give your BSN. If you want to buy a house, you give your BSN. If you're gonna get a COVID vaccination, you have to also give it. It's your ID number and it works for
Okay.
everything. It replaces using your actual ID when you arrive somewhere.
Okay.
And it's very cool because, for example, you don't need to, as a foreigner, you need a proof of residence. But as an EU citizen, you don't need a proof of residence. It's more saying, like, hey, I'm here.
Mhm.
And I also had that in Germany. It's called an Anmeldung, which means a sign up, in which you arrive to a new city and you say, hey, I am moving from this city to this new city. The government just wants to know where you are and what your deal is, and they keep record of you that way, in the sense that if you want to apply for a mortgage, they know if you, through that number, they know if you have credit card debt, student debt, they know your journey. It helps keep track of everybody. So in that book it said that. Then it also said that as a European citizen I have rights to certain
Mhm.
subsidies. So for example, I get something that's called a Zorg Toeslag, that because I'm a freelancer and because I'm a student, the government doesn't want me to worry about paying for insurance. So they cover 2/3 of my insurance. So every month I get a bank transfer from the government saying for your insurance. And Then a couple days later, I get a bill from my insurance company, and then I use that money, that's 2/3, and then I add 1/3 to it, and then that's my insurance already paid for.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
That's
And they also have that, for example, for housing. So I can go in the website and apply, okay, this is how much I make per year. This is my situation. How much can you give me? And the government will say, well, we think that with your needs, you're a single person, you're just you, so we're going to give you 700. So find a house at 700, and we'll give you half of your rent so you can live in that place. And
wow.
that applies for childcare too. There's a Kinderzuschlag, in which the government gives you 300 euros every month for every child that you have, and that's assuming that that's what the child needs for diapers, for to make sure that they have the minimum to survive.
Mhm.
And then if you need more, you just tell them, hey, I lost my job. So they're going to be like, okay, we're going to increase your child money until you figure out a better situation.
So
And they have it in the Netherlands and in Germany and in many other countries.
that's really amazing. So are these amounts that they give you realistic, like good amounts to find a good place, not like some place in a dangerous area? Like here in the US, when you get subsidized anything, it's usually like the
Mm-hmm.
lowest of the lowest standard. And some people opt out of that because it's not safe or it's just like so undesirable. So I mean the help is there, but it's not realistic for somebody to want to live in a place like that.
Exactly. And that was my fear for a long time. And then just last week, one of my friends was from Croatia. He was like, hey, I found a new apartment. Do you want to come by, get a beer, and see it? And I arrived in that place and I thought, you son of your mother, this place is freaking gorgeous. It's a small apartment. It's simple. It's small, but it's in a very good area. So you can find, if they tell you, and it depends on you. So for example, they will tell you you can tops get something that's 700 euros. You can get a one bedroom apartment in the center of the city for 700, or you can go a little bit further and get a two-bedroom apartment, or you can get to the outskirts of the city and get a three-bedroom apartment. So it's a realistic amount, but there are people who just don't want it. They say, I don't need it, and so on. But there's a caveat to that. The fact that here we pay very, very high, very, very high tax fees. So the taxes are very, very high. So when I was living in Germany, just to make it easy, I will give you just easy numbers.
Mhm.
Let's say I was making, according to my contract, 2,000 euros per month, which is a normal salary. So I was making a normal salary. There was nothing too high or too low. It was normal. To my bank account, what I would see would be 1,200, like little over half,
Mhm.
because those 800 euros were my tax contribution. So it was my social services, my investment for retirement. They were my there is some there for unemployment. I was already contributing to unemployment. Then a huge chunk went to government taxes and so on. So we paid a huge amount of taxes, and that's something that annoys my boyfriend a lot because he works here, so he gets very annoyed at the amount of taxes he pays. But then I say, okay, but the money that I'm getting from the government to pay for my insurance is coming from that money. And
Mhm.
then one day when I get a full-time job and I no longer need it, I can opt out of that. And then I will start paying very high insurance, and then um, I will have to contribute back. So that's the idea. For example, with the children, the idea is that a well cared for child will one day become a very lucrative worker and who will contribute to the program and keep contributing back.
Mhm. Yeah, and then that makes sense. The other thing too is that if you were not paying those high taxes, you could possibly be paying beyond those $800 for
Mhm.
all of those services and benefits. And I think that's what people like here in the United States is such a big deal. It's like, no, we don't want to pay high taxes. People freak out as soon as there's word about taxes going up, not realizing these taxes are going to be used for some of the benefits that you're going to get. But I think it's also about how a government explains things to people
Yeah.
that
And
you
it's
know.
it is also about how it's managed. So I would feel honestly, if I was living in Latin America, if I was living in Ecuador, from my experience living in Ecuador, even though I haven't lived there as an adult, I want to live in Latin America as an adult at some point, because I only lived there as a child or as somebody's daughter. I want to be there as an adult. if the government was taking the 40% of my salary and I knew how the police is and I knew how the roads are and I knew all those things, I would feel like I'm getting ripped off.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
definitely.
And in Germany, my dad would always be very annoyed at how many taxes he was paying. But then he would go on a super highway, which Germany has highways that don't have a speed limit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he would go 250 on a highway and he was like, my taxes at work. Because it's a perfectly kept road. And
Mhm.
also thinking that he was paying for my sister's primary school, who was a very good school, he was paying 80 euros per year.
Wow, that's super cheap.
And he was
Compared to
paying,
here. Mhm.
yeah, and he was paying 300 euros per semester for my older sister to go to medical school.
Wow. Wow.
So all those things added up. He kept saying like he pays super high taxes and it pains him, but he's also getting so much in return.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, so and that you can see it, that's the thing, that here I can see my taxes at work. I can see that um public school is very good, so people just go to public school. My sister goes to a private school just because of the language,
Mm-hmm.
because it's an international school and she goes to a school with kids who have also international backgrounds. So when she arrived to the school in Ecuador, she had the experience of everybody here has never been out of the country. Nobody here knows people from other races. Nobody here knows people from other cultures. But when she arrived to an international school, all kids were like, yeah, I lived in Asia for like 3 years and then I moved to Africa and then I moved to Sweden and now I'm here. So it's the experience, it's different.
So then, for a person moving from any country to, say, the Netherlands,
Hmm.
and let's say that they have kids who have to go to school,
Okay.
should they always look for a school that is an international school? And if yes, why or why not?
I think the beauty about the Netherlands and why I think it's a great place to move if you are a native English speaker is that the Netherlands has the highest level of English speakers in comparison. So if you, I think we did, the company I work for did an infographic about this. I think like 97% of people in the Netherlands speak English to an above average level.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, my neighbors who were in their 80s at one point, they all spoke perfect English. If not perfect, they spoke to a level that I could understand them and they could understand me.
Mhm.
So that's great. And then aside from that, it really depends on the experience that one is looking to have. If there are people who come and just send their kids to a normal Dutch school and they will need support with the schooling because the school would be in Dutch, but Dutch is also very similar to English, so some people adapt very well, and
Mhm.
some other people choose to go to an international school where everything is in English. So it really depends on the balance and on what is the best way to adapt at that time. So I would recommend looking at both
Mhm.
and then leveling out and actually asking the child. It's like, do you feel comfortable going to a school that's, it's already a big change, do you feel comfortable going to a school in Dutch or do you want to go to a school in English?
Mhm.
So
Wow.
I think that's a big part. I think something that contributed to my sisters and I having such an easy time with the moves is that my parents integrated us in the decision process. So for the move to Germany, my parents actually asked us, well, how do you guys feel? Do you guys want to stay here or do you guys want to move there? And we were like, for sure want to move there, but we always felt included. And it never felt like something that was happening to us, felt like something that was happening with us all the time.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I think that your life is enriched when you travel or when you even move to another country, because you're not just learning about the other country, but you're learning about yourself, and you're also learning how to adjust to change, which is something that sounds easy, but it's actually super challenging for people. I mean, sometimes a small change, such as just, I don't know, like something small changing in your life, like, I can't give you an example right now, but
No,
well, like,
I can give you an example. I can give you an example. I think it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe. My grandmother, my dad's mom, she came to visit us, and she was doing this little Europe tour because my cousin lives in Belgium with her kids. My aunt has lived in France for 35 years now. So she thought she would come and take this little tour of spending time with us and so on. And my grandmother has always wanted to go to this church called Fatima that is in Portugal. And I said, Grandma, I'll take you. I'll take a week off from work or 2 weeks off from work, and I'll take you. I'll do this. And I just took my 80-year-old grandma on a girls trip to Portugal, and we stayed in an Airbnb that was it was a first floor, but I thought a first floor was a ground floor, but it really wasn't. It was like a bed, like a step up, and I felt really bad about it because she has very bad knees, but we figured it out. And we ran into challenges that I knew how to solve because I had been traveling alone since I was very young. Since my parents sent me to Germany when I was 12, so I had to figure out public transportation. I had to figure out money. I had to figure out how to not lose my wallet in places. So I had this level of responsibility that I didn't see, that I wouldn't have had in Latin America, because Latin America, they would drive me everywhere and I would drive myself, and I had this very sheltered life, I think, because of security reasons. And in Europe I had a lot more freedom. And then I had traveled on my own before, so I knew how to solve problems. If I lost my passport, I knew what to do. If I lost my passport, that has never happened, but I knew that what to do. And then when I returned my grandmother safely, thank God, because I knew that if anything happened, my family would never stop saying it. If I drop an ice cube, they would be like, "Yeah, just like she dropped grandma." That was my fear. And then my grandmother told my mom that she knew that my sister and me, my older sister and me, that you could drop us in a jungle and we will figure it out. We will find a way out. And that she doesn't see that in my other cousins that have never traveled on their own, that have never left the country for extended periods of time, because they wouldn't know how to figure it out. And I think that's what traveling gives you. It gives you access to new cultures, it gives you access to new people. It humanizes a lot of people, because many times people are these images that you have in your head,
Yeah.
but it's not until you meet them that you realize that they're very complex, that there's a background, there's a context to them that you cannot appreciate unless you see it in flesh and blood. And it also gives you problem solving skills.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that suddenly you are in a new place and you have to learn how to make yourself understood by people who don't speak your language, or you have to find a way to do it. We always think that, oh, I have a phone, I'll figure it out on my phone. It's like, what if you don't have battery anymore?
Mm-hmm.
What if your phone is not working for A, B, C, D reason? What if you lose your phone and you have to figure out? So it puts you in scenarios in which you'll have to swim your way through it. It's like they're throwing you in a pool and you have to swim your way out.
Yeah.
And it gives you that challenge. It gives you challenges, and it gives you a chance to solve them on your own.
And yeah, I can totally see the confidence and the self-growth. It's so interesting, and I think it's so valuable. And I know that a lot of people are not able to travel or move outside of a country because of so many different reasons, like financial reasons or special needs, or maybe something
Migratory.
else. Yeah. So if you, one of the my curious one of my how do I say this? My curiosity as of lately has been the race relations in other countries outside of the United States, because here,
Mhm.
as the world knows, it has been super intense. So, being a person from Latin America, having lived
Mhm.
in Germany and now living in the Netherlands, how has that been for you? Is there racism the way that you hear of it here in the United States, or has it been pretty inclusive and welcoming to you?
That's a great question, and that's a complicated question because I've had bad experiences with racism. I've had them. I had that very stupid ones. Like once I was walking down the street and three kids on their bikes. They must have been like 13. Maybe I was in like my early 20s. They spat on me and said, "Go back to Turkey," because apparently I look Turkish.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and thank God it was winter because I was wearing like a puffy coat. So I think if I had been wearing a tank top and it had fallen on my chest, I would have been very upset. But in that case, it was a puffy coat, so I brushed it off. And that was a really stupid one. I had another one in which I was dating a guy from the US and he was very white. And we used to go swimming together a lot because he was training for a triathlon. I had swam competitively when I was younger, so I was helping him train. And we didn't like PDA in the pool because we felt like that was work. And one day I stayed longer, so he kissed me goodbye and then he went to the changing room. And then, like a half an hour later, I showered. So I'm wrapped in a towel. I'm going to my locker to get my clothes. And an elderly woman, maybe in her 70s, approaches me and says, very politely, I'm sorry, darling, but in German, I'm trying to translate it in my mind. I'm sorry, darling, but it's just my personal opinion that maybe it would be best if you found a nice Turkish boy to date and your boyfriend found a nice German girl. I have no
Wow.
problem with it, but I know a lot of people that would have an issue with it. Just so you know, I think it will be better for you too. And I was standing there naked. I was standing there wrapped in a towel, just thinking, what? I'm sorry, what? And she just like walked away, just like if just as it felt to me as if she was giving me a tip
Mm-hmm.
on the shampoo that I was using. It felt like so normal to her, and I'm guessing it was well intended. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
um but that was such a weird episode, such a weird thing, and we have all experienced that. I i think that because I'm light skinned and people don't think that I am from Ecuador, like they have a very different idea
Mm-hmm.
of what an Ecuadorian person looks like. And they usually assume that I'm from Turkey or that I'm from Spain or that I'm from Portugal, that I've had a different experience. But in most cases, people have just been curious
Mm-hmm.
about my background. Or I had other experiences in which I was at a party and in which I was the one of two people of color. And I remember suddenly this dude started asking my friend and me if certain words were okay for him to use as a white person. And I thought, okay, we are not the we didn't come here for this. It's not my job. I appreciate you being curious and I appreciate that very, very much. But I cannot speak for other people of color. I can only speak for myself and she can only speak for herself. We can have a discussion about this in another scenario, not which in which I am like 4 beers in. Just let me have this discussion when I'm completely sober.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has been, so there is racism present there. The Netherlands has a conflict every Christmas because in the 80s, some dude wrote a children's book about Santa having an assistant called Black Pete. And
What?
Black Pete, yes, Black Pete has very African features, but he's black because he came down the chimney, even though you can tell that it's a caricature of a black person clearly.
Oh,
And Black Pete takes bad kids. So instead of bringing them coal, he will
oh my
put them in
God.
his sack and he will take them away.
Oh my
So
God.
every year there are protests and there are arguments about Black Pete and how Black Pete is offensive, and people say that he's not offensive because, and then people go like, it's a tradition, and I'm like, it's a tradition that it's 40 years old. It's not like it's 2 centuries old. It's like some dude wrote a book 40 years ago. Let's all chill about it. So to finish my thought and to answer your question the best way that I can, there is racism. There is racism everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There is not the level of violence that you see in other places.
Mm-hmm.
And in German culture and in Dutch culture, what I have seen is that if they see that you want to integrate, if they see you trying, they will try with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, Germans are very, the Dutch are very honest. The Dutch are they're not going to mess around. A Dutch person is going to just blab the truth and see how you react to it. A German person is going to be a little more cold, and to a Latin American person, they might even seem like they're rejecting you. But it's because of their culture. So one has to also be very aware of the fact that they're different cultures. It's a completely different way of expressing themselves. So even though German might seem very retracted and almost distrusting of you at first, once you show them that you're trying and they'll try with you. They'll support you and And in my experience, there's more good people than there is bad people. Usually, the people who are racist are they don't have a certain level. They have a low level of education. Like there is a political part. There's even political parties that are openly against Islam or against immigration. They're openly about it. They're unlike in the US, we don't have just three or four. We have like six for each country, and then those are the big ones, and then there are like six more that are small ones. And there are parties who are openly saying we don't want Muslim immigrants or we don't want any immigration at all. So they're open about it. It's not as hidden. They would rather be like, yeah, I openly don't like you because you're Latin American. And I'll be like, okay, that just means that I am not going to interact with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a core difference between at least what I have seen from racism in the US than I have seen racism in Europe. It's more open and honest, and it's usually the minority or the AfD, which is the party against immigration in Germany. They're usually in the protests. You even see in the protests, it's very like people with a lower level of education. They usually have other health problems. You can tell that they like alcohol and so on. So it's not you can spot them and you can know, okay, this is not a situation in which I want to be involved in.
Yeah. Oh wow. Well, that's really good to know. I'm always curious about that because the last like 10-15 years here in the US, it has been intense with race relations, among many other things. So it's definitely one of those topics that comes up, especially around every campaign, that comes up, the big campaign, like presidential campaigns, and people start talking, maybe I should consider moving to another country, but where would I go? Because I know that there's racism everywhere, but how intense is it in other countries? So that's why I was
Yeah,
asking. But
yeah, of course. And to give you like that thing about racism coming up every election, it does come before the election, during the election, after the election.
yeah.
My boyfriend was called a racist the other day, and he's like, please don't tell my girlfriend of 2 years and her very Latin American family that I'm a racist, because that will be very strange. And I
Yeah.
thought,
Yeah. Some people, I mean, people get very defensive. And I think throughout the world, it has been like such a sensitive topic. And yeah, there's a lot there, but I don't want to go into that topic because then that's going to be like a whole nother hour. But thank you
yeah,
so much.
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, it definitely is. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's so fascinating. It makes me want to like, gosh, I wish I would have had that travel experience as a kid. But then it's also still not too late for me to have that. And it's all a matter of planning and choosing like how to go about it. I'm not sure if I'll ever do it because my family right now is very comfortable and not open so much to moving anywhere, but life takes so many turns, you never know. So
Of
but
course, I would
lastly.
recommend
Mhm.
if that's something that you want to do at some point and you're worried about your family, especially your kids being open to the idea, I would recommend looking into exchange programs like the Erasmus program, for example, and have them do a seven. That's the first thing that I did when I was 12. That I did a 7 week exchange and to a different country, and that really opened my eyes and made it like it's not as hard, it's not as complicated, and you can move to a different country for 2 months because you have a work project, for example.
Yeah.
I think especially with the work that you do, I think that if you reached out to international schools in the Netherlands and offer them this and said, I can give you a 2 month training, I'm happy to come to you for a 2 months training and train your teachers on this, maybe that would be a way to experiment with moving to a different country for without making the chop, but maybe
Yeah,
just a slight cut.
that's a brilliant idea. I'm going to explore that definitely because it would be amazing to at least spend, say, like the summer over there working and then my kids exploring and maybe even I know that the school years are different in some countries, like in Latin America. Our summers are still the kids are still in session. So
Mhm.
I have friends who have gone to Latin America and they put their kids right into school because they're in session. And while they're in on vacation here in the US, they go ahead and they are able to integrate and learn the language faster because they're in school. And it just gives them a whole different experience. But thank you so much. And last, I just want to ask you about your podcast
Oh,
because yeah, I think it's a great idea. And but yeah, tell us what is your podcast about And how often do you publish a new podcast?
Yes. So the Inspiring Leaders podcast, which is the podcast that I'm doing in partnership with the Global School for Social Leaders in Austria, is a podcast about people who have dedicated their lives to make a change in the world. And we move through time and through the world for looking for these stories. And I try to find speeches because I think listening to a person's voice actually makes them more real. So I find speeches whenever wherever I can and integrate them into the podcast, and then I give context about the story from those particular speeches. So for example, if one episode is about Rosa Parks and she's in the Million Man March, and I give context to what is the Million Man March.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have another speech about Ibrahim Omar, who is he works in the House of Commons in the Parliament in New Zealand, and I explain what is the House of Commons. Let's start there. What are those different political levels? And I had you in the podcast, which is great, and that is a new series in which I'm actually interviewing people that are living now, and they can talk about their work. Um, I think that there are so many people doing amazing work and they don't get the recognition that they need because they're in the ground floor. They're boots to the ground, and those are the kind of people that I want to interview.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have your Bill Gates, you have your Melinda Gates, you have your Elon Musks, who are already at a level in which they're the dreamers, they're the planners, but the people who are actually going out there every day, the people who are in the front lines, let's say in the front lines, actually like you, giving the trainings, talking to the people, talking to the victims, talking to the parents, talking to them, they are so valuable, and those are the people that I want to give a space to in the podcast. So it will combine interviews with people living today like yourself doing amazing work, and people who have already died or people who are giving speeches, and just give them visibility and tell those stories. And it's been a journey, it's been a wonderful journey for me personally, because when I was living in Mexico, for example, there was my sister was volunteering at this hospital called El Yanga, and I had no idea what it was. I knew, okay, it's a word.
Mm-hmm.
And then through this podcast, I learned that Gaspar Yanga was actually an African slave that was brought from West Africa to what now is Mexico, enslaved by the Spanish people. And then he liberated himself and a group of 25 men and women and eventually created his own city. And it was the first independent town in the American territory. So he was the first liberator of the American continent. And his town is 15 kilometers from where I used to live. So it has brought me this connection and how we're all connected when we look at each other as humans.
Wow, I love that. I can't wait to start listening to all of your episodes. And how often do you publish a new episode?
I try to publish once a week, and it's usually two stories, one interview, two stories, one interview,
I
to
love
give it variety.
that. Okay, and the name of it again?
Inspiring leaders.
Inspiring Leaders. There you go. Wow, Alex, thank you so much. You have been just a wealth of information and with just really cool stories. I love it. And you're inspiring me to just like get courageous and try something, anything at all, just to at least get my feet a little bit wet, like traveling to the EU, and hopefully one day actually living there. That's always been a dream of mine. I don't know why or where that idea came from. Maybe it was because of the multiple moves as a kid, or maybe it was because I got to live in South Korea when I was in the military, and that was just like a big aha moment. Like, wow, it's just all these little things that you notice that are so different than where you're used to, living around in. And I think that I'm missing out, and I don't want to like grow old and die without having visited other places, or at least just giving my kids the experience of doing that. And so I envy you that you're out there, you're traveling, you're living in a totally different country, and you said that you eventually might want to go back to Latin America and live there as an adult. So I know that your travels are not over yet, and that's really exciting.
No, no, they're not. It's the dream. It's like I've experienced Latin America in a way, and I know that as you grow and change, you will experience the same thing in a completely different way. So I just would like to say that the first time is the hardest one. After the first time, it becomes very easy. It becomes almost second nature. And I would recommend that. And to everybody listening that says, I will never be able to do that, for migratory reasons, for financial reasons, for social reasons, because I don't know what people's stories are, I would tell them to try to go on apps like Clubhouse and listen to podcasts and try to learn from other people's experiences
Mm-hmm.
and be creative and see, like, you can learn so much from books and from movies that are so much too Hollywood and to dramatize and to glamorize. Like Paris, for example. Like I watched Emily in Paris. I have family in Paris. I've gone to Paris multiple times. That's not Paris. Paris does not look like that. Let's just like stay away from that. But yeah, even if it's just in your mind, even if it's just traveling in your mind, you'll learn from it. Go talk to your neighbor, talk to your friend. If you have a neighbor that comes from a country you have never been to, invite them for a coffee and talk to them, because in the end it's all about people.
Mm-hmm.
It's about learning. And I would love to make another interview with you and talk about what the process of moving is, what the financial process is, and just give practical tips and recommendations, because that book that I got was tailored for students, but there's so many things in there that could tailor to non-students. And that's a project that I have in the future, and I would love to continue this conversation. So thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. And I am going to take you up on that. We will. Yeah. Well, let's have that discussion. Let's set it up. Thank you, Alex, so, so much. I love speaking with you. And thank you for making time. And thank you for creating that podcast to educate us and to just bring in these enriching stories to us. So, yeah, we'll talk again.
We'll talk again, Daddy. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Oh my gosh, that was such an amazing talk. I'm nerding out here because I love talking travel and just learning about different cultures and different experiences, because I strongly feel that that has been one of the things that has helped me grow as a person. It's a challenge when you have to adjust to your surroundings. And I know that not everybody's able to easily do it, but if you just try, like Alex was saying, just try by visiting for a short period of time and then increase that time as you go on. It can be a very life-changing experience. So if you like this video, please follow this channel, follow me on Instagram, and come on to Dalitalks.com and subscribe to my newsletter so that you can be alerted about upcoming events, upcoming guests, and so that you can get additional resources. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.